consciously, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. When you come from a very conservative Southern background, all of a sudden your world turns upside down. Not having a framework or understanding why or what was happening to me, I began a very interesting journey. And through that journey, I began to understand that, yes, we are not alone. Nor do we know what we think we know with our minds. In 2003, I began to understand that I worked very closely with some things that I didn't quite understand. I didn't give them names because I didn't have a framework to understand names. And yet, people would be put into my framework, into my environment, and they would say, oh, well, when you say this, we know it comes from here. And so the story started. When you look back on your own experience, it's just a story. So my story of my experience is like a puzzle. And as we talk today, there's a little bucket down here, and it has puzzle pieces in it. And so I'd like to offer each one of you the opportunity to come and retrieve your piece of this puzzle that we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes. Because the puzzle pieces are significant and important in what we're creating individually and collectively here on this planet now. When I was putting together the presentation, which is unlike most that I've done in the past, I was only instructed and given a directive to begin at the end, leave the middle to be filled in, because that's what we're doing here at this conference. We are creating something that has never been available to us on this planet, in the history of this planet. And each of you are a piece of the puzzle. So I'd like to start at the ending, because in order for us to recreate, we have to understand what we're creating. During my experience with what I refer to as the off-planets, the multiverse, there would be times when I would be a little testy. I would stomp my feet because I didn't think that I was understanding what they were trying to get me to do, and it didn't make any sense because it often felt like I was isolated, alone, with no direction. And so I was given the opportunity to look at the puzzle that we're getting ready to put the last pieces in here at this conference. And when I say the last pieces, they're not the last pieces of the entire creation. It continues, and it will continue to build. But we are closing out another phase of the Earth Project. So let me share with you what happened at that gathering. We all gathered, each of us who are sitting here and those who are not here in the room with us, at what I refer to as the table of creation. We're standing around, and each one of us is holding the gifts that were given to us by Creator, because we're going to put the puzzle together. Because none of us really know. We only know our piece. I'm really very competent at my piece of the puzzle with the Earth Project, and yet each one of you has a piece of that puzzle, so I'm curious to know what the puzzle pieces look like when they all come together. We all stood around the table, each of us, very quietly, and one by one we walked to the table and we laid our piece of the puzzle in. And as the last piece of the puzzle was laid on the table, there was a hush in the room. And it became very still. And it was very bright. And the heart pounded with anticipation. Because what we had created wasn't just about what we're experiencing here on this planet. Creator stood with us and said, I am well pleased. Because what has been created is not just about my children on planet Earth. I have seen the multiverse come together one by one and assist my children who live on planet Earth so that they might become part of a greater community. No more will we stand in diversity and competition. Our uniqueness will come together and we will have one heartbeat. We will have one breath. We will have one touch. And so we all left the table and we went back to our lives, wondering what it would actually look like, and could we actually do that? Could we actually create something? Because we all have our differences. We don't all look alike. We don't all sound alike. We don't all dress alike. And some of us really don't even like one another. And how do we sit at a table to create something as significant as unification? So the Earth Project began with 3 phases. The first phase was, first of all, we have an emotional imbalance on the planet. And so the multiverse began to come together and look at, well, why doesn't it work? We have people with big hearts. We have caring people who are dedicated and committed to coming together as a unified community. Why isn't it working? We began to explore. Each time we would find why. And it all came down to something we've known since the beginning of time. When you look at the history and you look at all of the other cultures that come together, they've all told us the significance of the divine form. That's this body. Gets us from point A to point B. Oh, so much more than that. So much more. But what happened to us? We began to feel that our spirituality was much more important than our physicality. And so we began to disrespect our form that was intricately created with the same expertise and dedication and love and care as our spirit, as our soul that lives inside. How do we take care of that? How do we bring that back? So the project began with what we call phase 1, and that was to find out, well, what's wrong with the human form and how did it get hijacked to start with? Well, that was pretty easy, because when you look at everything that's going on around us, all the distractions and all the emotional input that we have from television and everything else, not to mention some things that I won't mention, we began to realize, wow, it doesn't even work the same way it did. When all of these incredible codes and tools and practices were begun way back in the day, the body was not distracted by everything. It had a relationship with the planet. It understood how to walk on the planet. It understood how to feel with the planet. So the first thing was, wow, we're not feeling anything. We don't touch. We don't hug. We don't stand together side by side. So the first 3 parts were to decide how can we assist. Well, the first thing we have to do is to get the body working again. I'm not talking about taking vitamins or eating good food or anything else. I'm talking about how it functions. So if you look at the body and the way this communication works in the body cellularly as well as electrically, it's like this ginormous computer system. And it's got a virus in its program. So the Earth Project set out to create a new program that would be more compatible with how we as human beings walked upon the planet that we are living on, because she too had changed. The good news about the planet, though, is that she has always known that her skin and her form was important. She has always known that how she responds to what's going on in front of her and on her is important. So she burps or she spews or she cracks herself open a little bit to release the pressure. But there's no blame. There's no judgment in that. And there's no terror. She's not here to punish us. She's here to do what she's required to do, to stay steady, to carry us through the gateway to our dimensional realities that are far beyond what any of us can even imagine. So what happens with that? Well, first of all, we didn't know how to go. We had to be taught again to slow down and to listen and to experience and to feel her. And that was going to require a little bit of help. So we move into phase 2. Phase 2 brings on a technology. Well, we don't need any more technology, right? Well, maybe we do. But this is a technology that is based on the planet herself, the universe itself, the natural rhythms that we are all forgetting. And we're bringing them back. But we're assisting you, we're supporting you, cradling you like a baby. Just long enough for you to remember what you already know, what is already in your heart. Because, surprise, that's where it comes from. It is embedded and encoded within every human being on the planet. That rhythm, that knowingness. Not up here in our brain, in our little database, in our hearts. Well, that worked out pretty well, but what we noticed pretty soon was, it's not enough. Because we've got to engage it, or we're doing the same thing that everybody else has been doing. We're doing it to it. We're asking you to look outside of yourself for the very things that are important for you. So once again, we call a meeting, and by this time, not only are the grandmothers and the grandfathers from Andromeda with the technicians that are more than I can even count sitting at the table, but we're beginning to build a collective of the multiverse to come in and assist, just like they did eons and eons ago when they brought in the star codes that Chief Golden Light Eagle gives you to share with you. The indigenous have held those codes sacred for many, many years. And they too at times would wonder, well, things aren't always looking really good for us in our tribes. We're combative sometimes, and we're disagreeing about things that we shouldn't be disagreeing about. And we're not walking as softly on the earth as we used to. And our children don't understand some of the things because they've scooted off to the big cities. What again is stopping that from happening in our hearts to begin to come back to be in resonance with the planet? So here we go with another phase. And that's where we are today. We are at that phase where we are coming together into the sweet spot. It's not been a very pleasant journey for most of the time. I began with a diagnosis of cancer. I was sick with everything you can imagine. I've had my systems worked on from off-planet intelligence to see where the routing went away. How did we miscalculate? What did we do wrong? Only to find out we didn't do anything wrong. We just forgot to remember where we move and how we move on this ground, on this planet. We don't walk softly anymore. We don't sit in the stillness anymore. We've forgotten. Help my children to remember they've forgotten who they are. So here we are. We're about to remember. How many of you came to this conference curious about what you were going to experience when you got here? And perhaps even thinking that maybe it's going to be like the last one I went to. Was it? Is it? Because I'm hearing from people who are moving around in the corridor, well, you know, there's something a little bit different here. And the something a little bit different here is that in October, we were blessed in this corridor with a large, what they call the Andromedan Earth-based fleet. They have held us and cradled us. The Pleiadians have held us and they have cradled us. We now have representatives from the multiverse who are now here with us. Can we see them? Depends on whether or not you have eyes to see and ears to hear. Because if you do, they are here. They are here because we are their children. And they are here in support of us now. 2008, we had worked very, very hard, and we knew that we were not going to be able to move the planet with her inhabitants fully intact through the gateway in what was deemed 2012. That didn't sit well with most of us who had been part of this for so long, because our agreement with Creator was that when the planet, who had held herself back for so many years, had agreed to wait until we were ready, at great sacrifice to herself. We had reached that point that I didn't want to be part of something that couldn't be complete. So I'm on my last assignment. I am closing out all that I could do with regard to the interface of the technology, the physiology, and working with the guys upstairs, the boys upstairs, I call them. Between South Carolina and Georgia, I felt an enormous pain right here. And I don't remember going back home. The next thing I remember is being put into a hospice and told that I was most definitely going to die. And so I was a little excited about that, because quite frankly, I was a little tired of being here, because it had been a long, long journey to that point. Like most of you who have been doing this work, we find ourselves alone. We find ourselves isolated. We find life sometimes looking fine for somebody else, but pretty dismal for us. But what happened during that time was that I actually did. I was pronounced, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm getting ready to, oh boy, this is good. I don't have to come back down. Look at her. She's down here. She has no more life. She has no more worth. I can't do this anymore. Send someone else. And I'm told, no, we still have work to do, because we will bring this to full completion. And I would be given 3 years to recover. Well, that was a joke in itself, because 6 months later I was off on another assignment. But held together by duct tape and twist ties was my version of my reality at that time. But we continued to move all the ones that were part of this project. And we understood at that time that we had the ability to go as a collective, residents of planet Earth, through the gateway that had been set and established for us to move through. Now, to make it easy to travel through, we were given certain vector codes which allow us to navigate, just like driving a car. We're driving a car through a big debris field so we won't hit by any boulders. We were maybe a tad short, but Creator saw that we had all worked so hard that it was okay. Grace, by grace, we were given permission to move into the fifth dimensional reality through the gateway, Well, we thought, well, that was going to be okay, because now we're through, right? We're finished. Wrong answer. Once again, we're called in for a meeting, and by this time we had probably 13 of the multiverse. We had technicians, and when I am a technician, sometimes that's a little uncomfortable because I'm not always warm and fuzzy. I'm very precise, because the work that was required in order for the physiology and our planet herself to move through with the conditions that we had to move through, it was very precise and very limited. We worked in a very narrow corridor, and sometimes it wasn't pleasant at all, and sometimes those of us who were part of this would get a little testy, but yet we persevered. We realized that in 2013 we would once again recreate. So what was going to have to happen? Well, in 0909, 101010, and 111111, we brought in the additional frequencies that were required, the vibrational frequencies that were required for us to move smoothly. We just repeated them then. We hit the next thing, October, November, December. We were repeating the same thing for the next year of 2013. What were they about? The three components that the human was still having great difficulty with was trust. We didn't trust. We didn't trust ourselves. We didn't trust one another. And some were beginning to not even trust Creator because we'd been promised a little bit easier ride and it wasn't happening. We were still deep in judgment. Sometimes it was a little more subtle than others because it was like, well, I don't judge anymore. And then you'd realize, oh, but I do. I still have judgments about myself. I'm not worthy. I'm not up to the task. Oh, yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. Or we wouldn't be here. We would not be sitting in this room. We would not be participating in this conference. We would not be here. So to move through the trust, to move through the judgment, is required in order for us to come into the final phase of the project, and that was absolute unification. We've come here to become one family. That was the mission of the Earth Project. It was the directive. And it's been sometimes the command when we'd be called in to say, excuse me, but you're going to have to learn, as my friend Betty says, the beautiful no. Because we can't do it all. We only have to do our part. That's why the puzzle pieces are here. I don't have to do your part. I only have to do my part. And my part is to provide to the best of my ability all of the sequencing and all of the assistance working with that divine intelligence called Creator and the multiverse, just like you, just like you. So it's like, oh, well, you can do that. No, we all can. Physiologically, every human being on this planet is now encoded with every bit of the information within their DNA. They access it immediately. We have technology that will assist you to do that, but we also have what we call practical application. It's easy for me to stand up here and talk to you and tell you about stuff. We've all heard the stories. We've all heard the things we can do differently, right? You know, because how's it working for you? How's it working? Are you still having difficulty? Are you still feeling like you're alone sometimes? The world's going to, where in a handbasket? And what can I do? Well, the project defined what each one of us individually and collectively can do. And it was designed to be universal. It was designed to work within whatever framework you move. It doesn't matter if you're Native. It doesn't matter if you're Catholic. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish. What matters is, are you a human being? Well, sort of, kind of we are. There are a few variables in that one. But we agreed to come and be fully present in a form, in our bodies, to do what was required. And what is required is that we do not stand in elite groups. We do not stand in separation. We do not stand in families that are not willing to move within other families. We're erasing the lines. No more counties, no more cities, no more communities, no more states, no more countries. We were asked to erase the lines of separation that we have drawn. We drew them. We drew them. Not only did we drew them, we continue to allow them to exist. And why? Because we individually do not feel that we have the power to live our lives in absolute resonance with the planet upon which we reside. Remember, she's just like us. She's got a skin, just like this. She has consciousness, just like us. Do you think she doesn't hear? Do you think she doesn't cry when we are full of judgment and we're full of anger and we are separating ourselves from one another? Do you think she does not feel? Take a look around. When you see her flooding the land, you think she's punishing us? No. She's quieting. Because if she did not take those steps, we would not be here. And yet we don't respect that because we do not respect ourselves. So the last message from the off planets was that we will gather in this conference because we're going to open up the sweet spot. We're going to show you why this corridor that we are in, this little middle Tennessee fulcrum, surprise, surprise, those of you who live in Tennessee, you are the tipping point for the consciousness and awareness of the entire planet, plus how it moves out into the multiverse. This isn't just about us. The repercussions of what goes on here affects the entire multiverse. And they are eager and have been willing for the last 20-some years, personally in my life, assisting us to reach this tipping point. So did we do it? Do you think we did it? You're right. You're right. We are here today because we have come to this fulcrum. And afterwards, there'll be a map out on the table across from the registration desk that actually shows the intersection of these two corridors. Well, the first corridor is the latitudinal corridor that most of us have been working and gathering in, and it's global. It goes around the globe. Simple way to reference that, I-40. We used to say, oh, we're working the I-40 corridor. Any of you grid workers ever work the I-40 corridor? Yeah. Keeping it stable. Two sides of Tennessee. Rift, Madrid on one side, Appalachian Fault Line on the other side. We're in the rocking horse. So we have movement. We have movement. But we don't have chaos because we have allowed ourselves to come to this tipping point to say, no more. No more. We will do what is necessary now. When I was invited, in August of 2013, a big spider web grew outside of my window, and I was in Sedona. And I don't know the native tradition, so I'm going, oops, I can't get out my door, got a big spider web out there. So I called my friend Janice, and I said, I've got a spider web outside of my door. What's that mean? She says, oh, by the way, the grandmothers are coming through here on their way to Southern California for the last Star Knowledge Conference. You need to come back here because you need to see them. And I'm going, oh, dear, I don't walk in that tradition, so I know nothing about it. What possible reason would I have to do that? My directive from off planet with my team was that I would be in Nashville on October 8th. My daughter, Lisa, would pick me up here and take me back to Memphis on October 9th to pick up a car. Well, that was a joke in itself, too. At the time, I didn't have one. We sat in the car dealership. We got my car. And then I drove back to Deanna's little cabin. Guess what latitude the cabin is on? The same as Mound Bottom. Also, the same as Mr. Tom Hendricks' wall. Another connection with the native indigenous. Been working 10 years coming in and out of the cabin. This time I was in the cabin for a little bit longer. And they got really, really busy because that's when the Andromedan fleet came in. That's when the Pleiadians came in and said, okay, we're ready. We're on go. We're going to give you a longitudinal line now. Okay, I've never had one of those. What does that mean? Oh, it's going to be a new corridor. And where those two corridors intersect, we're going to call it the sweet spot because it's going to be the tipping point. I'm getting out a map. I'm trying to find out what that looks like because I have the latitudinal numbers and I have the longitudinal numbers. I'm a numbers girl, not in the same way my daughter is, but I am a numbers girl. I follow those sequences. And it's right here. It crosses and makes this nice little box right here where we are. I wonder what that's going to mean. Well, of course we know it's the tipping point, and even the grandmothers knew that. I have a bead in my ear that was given to me a while back that had been blessed by the 13 grandmothers. So I found that recently and began to wear that again. And then I spent the evening listening to Grandmother Silverstar. And I'm amazed because a lot of what she's talking about related and were very similar to the practical application that in the practical piece of the wave, we call it the wave, the technology that we use, and it's a practical piece, and they were talking about joining heart and mind. It was like, well, wow, but that's off the body. That's off the body. So I'm sitting there listening to her, and I'm going, ooh, should I go up and, can I go and speak to her? Can I share something with her that the indigenous are really pushing me really hard to go up and say? Well, I did. I finally crept up, and sat down in front of her and asked permission, and I showed it to her, and her eyes sort of got big, and she just smiled. Didn't say very much about it, but I was able to share it with her. Went back to Janice's house, spent 2 nights. None of us had toothbrushes. None of us had clean clothes. None of us cared. It was the most amazing time because she opened up that book, and there, with what they call, I believe, Jacob's Ladder, was every single stargate that I had worked through to complete the Earth Project. The explanations, the Andromedans, the home of the grandmothers and the grandfathers, the still point. Everything in the application and the technology is about reaching that still point. But within the stillness, there is movement. There is movement. We have to understand how to move in both. The planet knows how. We as human beings first learn to be still and then to recognize the movement within. As time progressed, I went back down to the cabin, and the boys upstairs got really, really busy because then they really got on a tear. We need this to happen. My next phone call from Janice, guess what? They're going to have a Star Knowledge Conference here in Nashville, Tennessee. Oh, by the way, it's going to be in September. Well, my timeline was September 22nd, actually. September 28th being what we call an assessment time, to understand that we would bring in the next phase, this next piece of the puzzle. Amazing, I'm going, really? How are we going to do that? Because, I don't know anybody up there, and I'm certainly, I've done everything I want to do. I don't want to do anything else. Oh, well, the thing you're going to have to do is you need 100 resonant keepers around the planet to hold the resonance for this to come about. Well, I had just done an interview for Gaiam. And on the Gaiam interview, I, out of my mouth, without my planning it at all, said, oh, and we are going to put 100 resonant keepers around the planet, and we're going to do them by group conference calls. Never done one before. Can we do it? Can we teach people this simple process that we are doing about the instant connection? Can we teach people that over the phone? Well, we found out we could, and we had the 100 before November of that year. So then we're really on go for this. Now we're here. We have gone through some pretty interesting challenges to bring all of this here to you. These people who have worked on this conference have gone beyond. The people that were additionally, there were some that needed to be here with us. And what happened? Well, here they are. Pearl means here. My heart was so blessed by her presence and her willingness to say, okay. Derek, who said, I'll make it happen. Do you understand what people have contributed and brought so that we can be at this place this time for the womb of the mother to be created, to be brought down onto this planet in this very spot, the place that we create. We are about to begin to create. Not make babies, hello. We're not here to make babies. We are here to begin that creative process. And all of you are pieces of this puzzle for us to do that. All that's required is a willingness. All that's required is that you stand to your piece of the puzzle. You don't have to do mine. You don't have to do anyone else's in this room. You have yours. And maybe it's just walking down the hall and smiling or greeting someone in the mornings. Nothing more. We do have some things and some tools that will make that easier for you, because the body recognizes the encoding that's inside each DNA right now. We'll be doing some of that up in the room in just a little while. I don't know what time it is. I'm weird on time. Am I good? I'm sorry? Oh, good. Okay. So I hope you will join us. I'd like for you to recognize all that you have within you, the potential that you have within you, the part of you that comes together as one heart, one mind, one nation. We're not nations anymore. We are not individuals sitting in this room. We are a resonant field right now. Look into your heart right now. Feel what you notice in your presence right now. Are you anxious? Are you concerned about things? Or are you fully aware and present in this time and this space? That's all we have to do now, is to be present. You know what it feels like. You can replicate it anytime you want to. Come into the stillness and feel the movement. The Earth Project, the projects are complete. Our assignment is finished. We are now here to be wholly human on this planet, sharing with one another. There's nothing else to do. Now we're in that creative process that all we have to do is create, believe, imagine. But imagine all the time how it affects the collective. It's not just about individuals anymore. It's about very much what the natives have said all along. It's the 7 generations. When you make a choice, you make a decision, think about how it affects forward. Pay attention to that. When you start practicing that, what happens is all of a sudden you start to pay a little more attention to what you do. You won't do it right all the time, but you'll do it perfectly, because even the ones that we think are not so good are going to teach you some pretty good lessons. So any questions or anything? It's been sort of a strange experience here, but any questions about the project? Any questions about what your role is? And I do hope you'll come and get your puzzle piece before you leave. And think about it. Spend some time with it. What is your piece of the puzzle? How do you fit into this big picture? Yes? It's in 6:06, like in about 10 minutes. In about 10 minutes, yes. So we'll all be dashing up the elevator, I think. And it's a very simple process. It was all designed, the Earth Project was based on what goes out into mainstream. It had to be universal. Every aspect of it had to be universal. It had to fit within every belief system, every practical application. If it didn't, we went back to the drawing board, because this is not about creating something new that somebody has to learn new. This is about working with what you already know at every turn, and something that you always have with you. It's not about something you have to go out and get, because it always begins with you, and it is always contained within your 18-inch sphere of existence. It's very simple. We teach it to children, and we can teach it over the phone, so that's pretty good. I will have 2 teachers that will begin to start working with that. They've got group calls that'll be starting in January. We sort of closed down to be sure that we had all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for being part of this. Don't forget your puzzle piece. I don't want to be standing there with one piece missing at the end of the story. I will have to then go back and rewrite it. Thank you.